So last night I went and I watched Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. And as you guys are probably aware, Star Wars is a franchise that is very near and dear to my heart. I've watched the original trilogy countless times. As a matter of fact, it is one of the main reasons why I can speak somewhat decent English, because it is not my native language. I watched the prequels quite a bit. I've watched The Force Awakens. I've watched everything that Disney has released as well. And, it was just one thing that I wanted to see through, to see the end of the Skywalker saga. And I already know that some people that, enjoy the new movies of Star Wars maybe more than some of us old timers that, still fixate on the original trilogy. Some of you guys will say that, oh, you guys are just like obsessed with the original trilogy. You can't like anything that is new. And I don't think that is the case. I think that is just like a weak excuse that some people try to come up with why some of us quite simply don't like the new movies. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with liking the new movies. I mean, if you like them, you like them. It's whatever. It's a movie at the end of the day. And don't let anybody ever make you feel guilty for liking something they don't. I like a lot of things that probably a lot of people don't like, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. So, like, if you enjoyed The Last Jedi, I mean, good on you. I'm glad you could enjoy that movie. I personally couldn't. But the reason I would dispute that, like, a lot of people just say, oh, you guys just like to hit on the new movies, is because Disney actually made one of my favorite Star Wars movies, which is Rogue One. Like, I loved Rogue One. I thought Rogue One was an amazing movie, and it delivered on a lot of things that I've always wanted to see in the world of Star Wars, which is basically show me more of the other stuff that doesn't just involve the Jedi and the Sith and the Force and all of this. And yes, there is some Force stuff and some Jedi stuff in Rogue One as well. Naturally, it has to be. It's a Star Wars movie. But the focus of the movie is something else. And I really, really appreciated it. I really enjoyed watching that other side of it. So when somebody comes around and says, oh, you're just like, you've got your rose-tinted glasses for the original trilogy, I'm like, no, I don't agree with that. I just think that there are some things that I like and there are some things that I don't like. And now let's talk about this particular movie. So I'm going to do things like this. First, I'm going to be talking about it without really getting into spoiler territory. And once I actually get into spoiler territory, I'll put like a warning somewhere in the video where it just says like spoiler zone, so that people know if you happen to scrub through the video when I'm talking about spoilery stuff. Now, I watched the movie, and I wouldn't say that Rise of Skywalker is a terrible movie, but I would also not say that it is a very good one either. I would say that The Rise of Skywalker is the consequence of the state the franchise was in after The Last Jedi. And basically, this almost seems like it's a movie that is trying to move a narrative forward whilst at the same time trying to apologize for all of the nonsense that happened on the previous film. As a matter of fact, I would even say that I would actually like to watch the rest of this movie, because it almost seems like, from what I saw at the theater, that about 50% of this movie was left at the cutting room. Like, whoever was editing this movie, I don't know why they were so pressured for time or what the decisions were made behind this, because like this to me just seems like it was very much a rushed film. Like a complete rush film is just action sequence into action sequence into action sequence. I even, threw out the meme, the Dave Chappelle meme yesterday on Twitter, where I said, after watching this movie, can I get a little bit more of that character development? Can we get some development? Because I wouldn't be surprised if some people watch this movie and they don't even realize that they introduced 5 new characters or something like that. I mean, I can't even tell how many new characters they introduced because they get so little screen time. They get there's not a single moment where our protagonists can just sit down for 5 minutes and have a conversation. There's not 5 minutes of our characters having a conversation, 5 minutes of peace. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, some of you might think, oh, he's clearly exaggerating. There's not 5 minutes of peace. Like, you remember how in The Last Jedi you had the whole Canto Bight scene? And there's this massive amount of time that they're just spending on this casino planet. It has nothing to do with anything, where there was no story being told whatsoever. And still there was also no action happening during those moments. It's this movie is the exact opposite. It's here's some action, here's some more action. It almost feels like they understand that if the audience has enough time to actually, process what is happening on screen, that they'll just realize that one of the major reasons why this movie is so rushed is because they're trying to fix what has happened on the previous movie. So a lot of the things that people didn't like about The Last Jedi, they're just kind of like getting fixed in here. Like, you will get, if you're someone who didn't like it like I did, you will get some degree of satisfaction from Rise of Skywalker because of the stuff that they kind of, that I think J.J. Abrams was the one who directed this one. I don't really follow the production of these movies. I just watch them. But I think J.J. Abrams was almost trying to, I'm sorry, guys. I know that you guys got screwed over on the last one. I'm going to try to do my best to fix this. And that becomes a major problem because it kind of like, it almost seems like it's trying to move forward. Oops, sorry. It almost seems like it's trying to move forward, but at the same time, it needs to fix all of the things that happened in the previous one. It's just, I don't know, it just completely screwed with the pacing of the movie. I thought the writing of the movie was pretty bad as well, because it's like, it's not that I didn't like the story they were trying to tell. Like, I could understand the story and where it was going, and I was like, I'm kind of into this story. So I like the meat of the story that they're bringing. But the problem is the writing does not deliver on almost anything. And it just seems like there were so many scenes that were cut off that a lot of people are going to be just like completely confused. I've been watching opinions from other YouTubers that have been posting their opinions out there, particularly one guy that I follow on here, who is Star Wars Theory. I watch a lot of his content because, you know, being a Star Wars fan, I like the fact that this is just someone who just talks about a bunch of different stuff in regards to Star Wars. And I was watching it, and he apparently loved it. He really liked the film. It wasn't the best thing ever for him, naturally, but he really liked the film. And I was like, okay, I can understand why somebody would like it. But for me, there were a lot of problems there. It's like if you unplug your brain and you just go and you watch this almost like you're watching a Fast and Furious movie. Or the first thing that actually came to mind was Triple X. I'm not sure if you guys ever watched Triple X with Vin Diesel, but it's kind of like that. It's like Triple X, but with a Star Wars skin, because there's just so much action. You can't even connect with the characters. And if you look at any of the other Star Wars movie ever made, there's a lot of character development. There's a lot of moments where action isn't happening. So you actually get to see what these characters are like. You actually get to know more about these characters. Like, after watching this entire trilogy, I still feel like I don't know a damn thing about Poe Dameron, which I just feel like it's a complete waste, you know? I can tell you guys one thing without going into spoiler territory. At least in this movie, Finn isn't a comic relief. So if you're a fan of Finn, you're probably going to enjoy this because, you know, he's not just relegated to being the clown, a jester. On the other hand, Hux's arc was, good God. I gotta get into the spoiler section to talk about all of this stuff because it's just ridiculous. But basically, at the end of the day, before we go into spoiler territory, I would just say it's not a fantastic movie. It's not the worst movie either. And it's a consequence of The Last Jedi, is what I would say this movie is. I'm not sure if I could advise people to watch or not. Like, I guess if you are someone who is as connected to the Star Wars franchise as I am, you'll probably end up watching it no matter what. But yeah, I don't think that. Let's just put it like this. At the end of this movie, I came out of this movie saying, you know what? I wish they had never continued the trilogy. I would rather not have had the trilogy at all. There's certain characters that I liked throughout this thing. I particularly liked Kylo Ren's role in the trilogy overall. I did not like Rey at all as a character. And basically what I'm saying is, like, the way that they messed with the story, they didn't really achieve anything that I find to be that great. And at the same time, they kind of destroyed some of the characters in the process through The Last Jedi. So that's why basically The Last Jedi poisoned the well for this whole trilogy, as far as I'm concerned. And again, I know that there's people out there that love The Last Jedi. Amen. Good on you. You're probably not going to like this video, and that is fine. Just don't let the fact that I didn't like it, you know, impede you from watching it again and enjoying it however the hell you want. And I don't even want to get too much more into it than that. So let's get into spoiler territory here. I'll put the spoiler warning probably here. I think I'm looking at the viewfinder. Here looks like a good spot. So we're getting into the spoiler zone. let's get started talking about this stuff. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the last line of dialogue in the film. For those of you that didn't watch it yet and that you don't care to watch it, at the end of the movie, there's a scene where it's just like all of the action has already taken place, right? Everything is done. Everything is settled. The conclusion is done. And Rey kind of goes back to Tatooine, and someone goes there. She goes to the homestead of Lars, where Luke was living during A New Hope. And she goes there to bury a bunch of lightsabers. You guys will understand why later. But somebody goes by the homestead and she's like, oh, it's been a long time since anyone's been here. What's your name? And she says, I'm Rey. She's like, well, what's your last name? She's like, Reys Skywalker. And I was just like, my left eye started twitching like I blew a gasket. I was like, the character, for starters, she's not a Skywalker, period. Just like, period. I don't care if you want to go into the whole, but Darth Sidious did this thing and the other thing and the other thing. So she technically, I don't care. She's not a Skywalker. Fuck that shit. Fuck that line completely. I was completely pissed off. Like, I didn't even, if that was not at the end of the movie, I would probably have gotten up and I said, you know what? Fuck this. I don't deserve this. I don't want to deal with this. That single line made me feel a lot of things, and I don't think any of those things was what they wanted me to feel. I was really fucking pissed off. Like, I'm sorry. She is not a Rey Skywalker. Like, get that. Even Star Wars Theory, who loved the movie, still said, no, she's not a Skywalker. Even and this is like a guy who is usually much more positive about Star Wars than I tend to be. Even he said she is not a Skywalker. Like, don't even get me. So I just want to let you guys know that at the end of this movie, she claims to be a Skywalker. And I was like, my mind exploded. I was like, dude, please don't stop, just stop. But anyway, let's go back to the very beginning. I just had to get that off my chest from the get-go. Let's go back to the very beginning. The initial crawl was atrocious. It was the worst crawl in a Star Wars movie ever. I kind of understand why they had to do that, because, Rian Johnson just left this whole goddamn franchise in a situation that's just like, where do you go from there, right? Like, where do you go from whatever the crap was that Rian Johnson did? You just don't know. You just don't know where to go from there. So in his crawl, I think like one of the first words in the crawl is Palpatine. Like, I get it. He's in the trailers, but we're just assuming that everybody watched the trailer and that we know that Palpatine is a thing. Is that what we're assuming? It's just basically the trailer starts. It's almost like this is a completely new movie, guys. Look, Palpatine is here. He's a major threat. We all have to get together and fight Palpatine. And I was just like, what? Like, what is going on? So Palpatine is here, and Kylo wants to kill him. And Palpatine is apparently broadcasting his voice through the galaxy or whatever. And I was like, what? I don't, it makes no sense, but I was like, all right, you want to go with the whole Palpatine thing? That's fine. Don't even try to justify how Palpatine showed up, how he's been alive this whole time, how he didn't get blown up with the Death Star, or how the Death Star, a large chunk of the Death Star ended up on Andor. Like, I guess that's okay. We'll talk about that more as we move forward. But anyway, the whole crawl, the initial crawl was like, Palpatine's here. He's the big baddie. We got to go fight him. And so the very first thing you see is Kylo shows up. He's murdering people left and right. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Kylo, do your thing. Murder a bunch of more people. Who cares? And he's looking for one of this movie's MacGuffins, which is a device that is a Sith Wayfinder, which is almost like kind of like a Jedi holocron of sorts. And that Sith Wayfinder contains the path to navigate some kind of like Force nebula, so that you can go through that nebula and you end up on the other hand, and there is a massive planet there, which is called Exegol. And in that planet, there's thousands of Sith. Wait, are they Sith, or are they Sith acolytes, or are they Sith loyalists? I don't friggin' know, but there's thousands of them. And I was like, I was under the impression that the only Sith was like the Emperor and Vader. And then now we had, Kylo Ren, who was trained by Snoke. But it turns out there's like thousands of them out there. They're just thousands. And they've been building a fleet of Star Destroyers, a massive fleet of Star Destroyers, which, by the way, every single one of those Star Destroyers has planet-busting capability weapons. So all of them they're like mini Death Stars destroyers. They're the Star Destroyers with the capabilities of the Death Star. All of them. They can all blow up planets. As a matter of fact, I don't remember during which scene, but in one of the scenes of the movie, one of those Star Destroyers just go to a place, blasts it up, planet gone. And I was like, all right, of course. And apparently that fleet is friggin' massive, and Palpatine's been working on it for the last 30 years or however long it's been. So Kylo goes in there, Palpatine is there. Palpatine's telling him, oh, you gotta go kill the scavenger girl. You gotta go kill Rey, which is kind of weird now that I think back to it, but whatever. Essentially, Palpatine wants Rey to go to him. At least I think that's what he kind of tells Kylo to go kill her, whatever. I've forgotten kind of parts of the story already. I should have done this video yesterday, but when stuff was still fresh in my mind, but I was really late when I came out of there. But anyway, so he goes to the Sith planet, and then he goes and he starts hunting for Rey again. And in the meantime, Palpatine's raising up this massive fleet. So then we cut to a scene where Poe Dameron is actually flying the Falcon. And I was like, oh, cool. Someone who's an actual pilot, who's like the ace pilot of the Rebel Alliance, is actually flying the Millennium Falcon. So there's kind of like a justification for the Millennium Falcon being so badass, instead of just like having Rey be the best lightsaber fighter and the best fighter pilot and the best at everything. There's actually somebody else there that's not the best of the best. And it was actually cool because there was a scene where they go in and they're collecting like a message from this ice planet, and they're instantly found by the Empire. So there's a chase sequence with the Millennium Falcon, and basically I know that I'm basically very vulnerable. Let's put it like that. I'm very vulnerable to Millennium Falcon footage. I love the Millennium Falcon as a ship. I always have since I was a kid. I love the Millennium. Like a lot of my friends are like, oh no, the X-Wings, this and that. And I'm like, nah, dude, I'm all about the Millennium Falcon. So whenever you show the Millennium Falcon on screen, I'm just like, fuck yeah. And there was a really good action sequence. It was cool because, like I said earlier, Finn is no longer comic relief. So Finn actually goes into the turrets of the Falcon and actually does stuff, as opposed to like in, I think it was The Force Awakens, right? Where the turret is jammed, and then the one doing the aiming is Rey, because she's like, oh, I'm going to pull off this maneuver and I'll aim your static turret into a TIE fighter. As much as I like that scene, okay, just, curb your pilot skills a little bit there. But anyway, so we get through this scene, and the scene was really cool. It was just a really cool scene. They're fighting the TIE fighters and all that. And something happens that I know a lot of people are going to have a problem with, which is light skipping, where basically Poe Dameron just kind of like jumps the Falcon and instantly goes out of light speed, and he's in a different planet. And I'm like, what? And then before you even have time to process that, he just like jumps the Millennium Falcon again and then gets out. And I'm like, dude, I remember a whole movie where that ship wasn't able to make a goddamn jump, and now you're jumping like 3 times in a row. How the hell are you even achieving that? That's insane. But ultimately, I'm kind of like okay with that, with them being able to light skip, even though it probably shouldn't be a thing. I mean, I would be more okay with it if their justification for it was like, oh yeah, but we did this, like maybe when they got back to the Rebel base or whatever, they could have explained, oh yeah, how did the new modifications on the Millennium Falcon work? Because Millennium Falcon's the bottom section of it looks very different from what I remember. Maybe it's just been a while since I watched the Star Wars movie or whatever, but the bottom of it looked very different. So it could be like, oh yeah, we did this special modification that allows, the Millennium Falcon, because it's a super special ship, it now allows it to like do this light skipping thing. But no, he light skips. But him light skipping wasn't even the worst thing that bothered me. What bothered me was that the TIE fighters that were chasing him light skipped right behind them. I thought the whole thing about the TIE fighters, maybe I haven't kept myself up to date on the lore, but if you even go back to like New Hope, you're like, no fighter that small can be this deep out into space. Must have been part of a convoy or something, right? Isn't that the whole thing about the TIE fighters? They need to be close to wherever they're operating. No, these TIE fighters that were chasing them were like mega special, so they're able to light skip as well. And then, they light skip right behind them. Now just like this, they're tracking them through light speed in real time. I guess that was kind of established in The Last Jedi when they did it with Snoke's destroyer, but, whatever. Oh, by the way, speaking of Snoke, I almost forgot to mention it because who the hell even cares about Snoke? But Snoke was created by Palpatine. This was just like revealed as kind of like a throwaway thing. It's like, hey, yeah, man, yeah, I made Snoke from clones. There's like pickled Snokes in when Kylo goes to meet Palpatine, you see like pickled Snokes in there, and I'm just like, Again, it's one of those things where the movie is just trying to justify. Because, what was his name? Ryan Johnson just like destroyed Snoke out of nowhere. I don't think that was kind of like part of the plan. And because of that, he's like, well, now I have to make him a meaningless piece of shit. So we'll just say that he was a clone created by Palpatine. Whatever. It's like, who cares? So yeah, they do their whole light skipping thing. And after that, they go to the base. They show some sequence of Rey training, kind of like to implicate that Rey actually does train. She's not just a Mary Sue. But then throughout the rest of the movie, she is a Mary Sue. So it doesn't make that much sense. I really didn't understand the point of the whole training thing. I think they were just trying to justify, this is why Rey's so powerful. Look at her training. And they actually... She in training was actually somewhat imperfect because you could see that there was like anger in her or something, which is actually kind of cool. It goes into a revelation that shows up later in the film. During this training sequence, Rey is using Luke's lightsaber, which kind of made me wonder, didn't this saber got destroyed in The Last Jedi, which it did, but I wasn't aware of who had kept the two halves. I guess Rey had the two halves and she just kind of like reforged Luke's lightsaber, which gives a little bit of weight to something that she ends up doing later in the movie where she reveals her own lightsaber at the very end, which is kind of weird because it's like if it's the end of the trilogy, why would you show Rey building her own lightsaber? Are you going to be telling more stories with Rey and that's not part of the Skywalker saga, but she calls herself Rey Skywalker? It's extremely confusing, but anyway, moving right along, we then see Kylo Ren rebuild his mask, and I kind of feel like the fact that Kylo is rebuilding his mask is almost like JJ taking a stab at Ryan Johnson. So Ryan Johnson takes a stab at JJ by saying, that mask is stupid, and then he destroys it. And now JJ takes a stab at Ryan by saying, no, I'm going to rebuild the mask, and he's going to be wearing the mask. That whole thing just kind of like tells you that there was no overarching plot for this whole thing. It's just a bunch of directors making fun of each other. And I just feel like that is so incredibly disrespectful to the Star Wars franchise that basically what you have is two directors like poking fun at each other and making their fun at the expense of, a significantly meaningful franchise for a lot of people, which basically had no overarching story to it. And this ends up being like him retconning, trying to fix all of the dumb stuff that Ryan Johnson had done. Like, as a matter of fact, one of the things that is even said during one of the Rebel Alliance based scenes, I don't remember exactly when this particular scene took place, but it is when they become aware of the fact that Palpatine is working on this massive fleet of Star Destroyers, all with planet destruction capabilities and all of this stuff. And someone goes in and says, we're going to need to do a holdo maneuver. And I was like, oh my God. I was physically ill when he said the words holdo maneuver. But luckily somebody came along and like tried to retcon that by saying that was a 1 in a million. Blah, 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 blah. So it's almost like what holdo did is too hard to do, is too hard to calculate. It was 1 in a million. It was something that's just like, we're just going to ignore that thing ever even happened. And I was like, cool, you should ignore it because it's fucking stupid. But anyway, at this point, the rebels become aware of the fact that they need to get their own MacGuffin to be able to navigate that nebula to get into Exegol and actually figure out what's going on with the Empire and all that. So they go to this desert planet where supposedly, there's like, that's where Luke was looking for this MacGuffin as well, to try and the Sith Wayfinder, whatever, to try and find his way to Exegol. And instead of finding that Wayfinder, what ends up happening is that Kylo Ren reaches out to Rey, and they have one of their, Kylo Rey things where they talk to one another and whatever. But it shows that the Force link that those two possess is actually a lot stronger than we initially predicted, because when they arrive at this desert planet, there's like this celebration happening and whatnot, and there's a character that puts a necklace around Rey, and Rey's like all happy and stuff while they are investigating, trying to find out this Sith Wayfinder thing. And so Rey has this necklace that's from this planet, from this celebration that is happening, and Kylo Ren is talking to her. He sees the necklace, and as they are talking about how they're going to deal with it, whatever, Kylo Ren's still saying, "When I next extend my hand to you, you will take it," etc., trying to pull her into the dark side. Essentially, Kylo Ren reaches out, grabs the necklace, even though he's not physically there. This is like their Force connection link thing. He grabs the necklace, he steals it from her, and severs the connection. So he's able to essentially teleport the necklace from her to him. That's how strong their connection is to the Force. And I believe that this is something that a lot of people are going to have a problem with in Star Wars, and probably a lot of you might even think, oh, Rurikhan's going to definitely have a problem with this. But it's like, no, not really, because most of the stuff that you can do with the Force is not really, super well explained. And now you guys are like, so how come you have a problem with Yoda doing Force lightning as a Force ghost? And I'm like, that's different. He's a Force ghost. He's dead. He's dead. And it's like, if you can bring Force ghosts into interacting with the physical world, then hell, the Jedi would have one hell of an army of Force ghosts to come through and just like thrash everybody around, right? Everybody casting Force lightning and whatnot. So yeah, that's my problem with Force ghosts. There's still a little bit of problem here, but it was necessary to fix something. We'll talk about that other scene that you guys are thinking about later. But yeah, I think that them having that Force connection that actually allows them to, transfer items and have different impacts in different sections, I think that was actually cool. And I can suspend my disbelief for that one. I have no problem with new special Force powers happening and stuff. I thought that was all right. So they have that moment. And as he rips out the necklace, they analyze the necklace like, they're in this planet, and send in the stormtroopers and whatnot. And there's a chase sequence on the desert planet. It was actually a cool chase sequence. I enjoyed it. Then they go on to this quicksand thing where they fall into a cave and there's a snake. And this scene was super confusing. It was just like really, really, really confusing, because like there's this snake thing there, and the snake is wounded, and you have no idea what the snake creature's doing down there. You have no idea why it's been wounded. You don't know anything. But instead of killing it, because this looks like a very threatening snake, like this is the type of thing that I'd be like, dude, blast that shit. Shoot that thing until it explodes. That would be my initial reaction to a creature that looks like that and is looking at you menacingly. But she's got some kind of a wound, so Rey goes in there and she Force heals her. Force healing. Again, I'm not going to be too hard on it because, Rey is supposed to be overpowered or whatever. So I'm like, yeah, sure. Force healing, I guess. She just heals up this snake, and the snake's like, oh, thank you. And she goes away. And I'm just like looking at this scene completely confused. Like, what just happened? Like, what part of the movie that did you cut out that we should have watched in order to understand what happened here? I was watching Angry Joe talk about it. Apparently there were like cutscenes where Rey was supposed to have fought the snake, was supposed to have wounded it, and then it goes in there and heals it. And that would make a little bit more sense. But apparently there was no struggle. There was nothing. There was just this snake there that was wounded. She moved away and a door opened. And it was almost like a video game moment. Like, where you have to solve a puzzle, right? In a video game. And after you solve the puzzle, like the doorway opens. It was just like that. It felt just like a video game where, hey, you solved the puzzle. You healed the snake. Congratulations. You get to move on now. While they were in this cave where they conveniently landed, they found this special Sith dagger that supposedly reveals the location of the next MacGuffin, which is the Sith Wayfinder that they had been looking for this whole time. And apparently the person who had this dagger is also the person who killed Rey's parents. And I'm not sure at which point in the movie it gets revealed, but I'll just reveal it now. Rey's parents were Palpatine's son. Was Rey's father was Palpatine's son, I guess. It shouldn't have been his daughter, right? It was just his... Was it his son or was it the mother? I don't know. One of her parents is directly related to Palpatine. Now, I don't know if that means that Palpatine busted a nut in someone or if Palpatine manipulated the Force, because supposedly Palpatine also manipulated the midichlorians to kind of like create Anakin Skywalker. So he could have manipulated the midichlorians to create his son or his daughter, whatever. And eventually they had a son, and that was Rey. So basically, Rey is Palpatine's grandchild for all intents and purposes. But I don't think at this point this had been revealed in the movie yet, but now you guys know. But the guy who had the knife was someone who was sent to kill her parents and bring her to Palpatine, but he failed. He just managed to kill her parents because her parents were able to abandon her in Jakku or whatever, and they left. So yeah, that's like a whole thing. A lot of exposition there, but that's kind of as much as you expect. So Chewie, who is with them at this point, Chewie picks up the dagger, puts it in his bag, and this is important because later, as they are getting ready to leave the planet, they have to leave the planet in a different ship because the Empire was able to capture the Millennium Falcon. So they go on the ship of this like mercenary that was the same guy who killed their parents. And as they're setting up the ship, Rey's like, something's happening, and she goes away. And right as the ship is getting ready to take off, Poe tells Chewie, go find Rey. Like, tell her to come back. We have to leave. When Chewie goes to find her, Chewie gets captured by the Imperials, and he gets put on a transport because he was going to be taken prisoner back to Ren's destroyer, who was like further... He's like orbiting the planet or something. But in the meantime, Kylo Ren comes in with his TIE fighter, and he's about to make a little windshield squash of Rey on his TIE fighter, right? This is the scene that everybody's watching on the trailer. Rey starts running, does a little thing, and basically what ends up happening, I was just like, wow. You couldn't have made her any more overpowered than that. She jumps over the TIE fighter, as we all knew, but I didn't know what happened afterwards. But she basically picks up her lightsaber, slashes the wing of Kylo's TIE fighter. No problem. Kylo's TIE fighter just like explodes off in the distance, but Kylo's fine. It's not even a problem. So eventually somebody realizes that Chewie's been captured, and they scream, I think it was Finn. Finn screams out to Rey, 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 which is what Finn does throughout most of this movie. Just like, Rey, 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 Rey. So Finn screams out to Rey, Rey, they captured Chewie. He's in the thing. He's in the transport. She looks at the transport, and everybody knows what's going to happen, right? When she looks at the transport flying away off the planet, she like reaches out, and with the Force, she grabs the transport and prevents the transport from taking off. And I was like, oh, wow, we're just that powerful now. Okay, I mean, I guess I shouldn't even be surprised at this point. And so Kylo gets off of his TIE fighter, which is like exploded into a million bits. He's fine. Not even a scratch on him, because Kylo's kind of overpowered as well. So Kylo comes out of his TIE fighter. He looks at her, looks at the transport, trying to make a getaway, and he grabs the transport too. So the two of them start struggling over the transport. And I'm just thinking back to The Last Jedi, like, I remember the last time you two did that. Didn't end up too well. So maybe we should consider what it is that we're doing, because we're about to kill Chewbacca. That's about to happen. I was like, yeah, you're going to break that shit just like you broke Luke's lightsaber. That's going to be a thing. But what happened was actually a little bit worse than that, which is at some point, Rey starts getting real mad over the fact that Kylo's not letting her, bring the ship back down. And so lightning comes out of Rey's hand, and that's like your first hint that, like, what the fuck? She's got Force lightning. She's got Force heal and Force lightning. Like, what in the hell is going on here? So she throws the lightning, blows up the transport, and everybody's like, oh no, Chewie's dead, no! So they killed Chewie for about a grand total of a minute and 30 seconds. I don't know the exact time, but like, Chewie was dead for a couple of seconds because in like the very next cut or something, Chewie shows up and he's alive. He was in a different transport all along, and all of that struggle was completely meaningless. So they all go away because what ended up happening was the dagger that she had found, which by the way was in Chewie's possession. So now the Empire has the dagger. The Empire, First Order, Kylo Ren has the dagger. And so this dagger had like an inscription that was in Sith language, so C-3PO could translate it, but his programming prevented him from translating that dagger. So the idea they have is we have to go to a place where they can, reprogram C-3PO, whatever, mess with his mind to get C-3PO to actually translate what was written on the dagger. And so they go to this planet called Kijimi, and Poe Dameron is initially very hesitant to go to Kijimi because he says, something went wrong in Kijimi. It's very bad. I don't want to go there. So when he gets there, they're immediately ambushed by an old acquaintance from Poe Dameron, which apparently is this lady he screwed over. And she's real mad at him. She hates him. She wants him dead. She wants to turn him in for a bounty. She then wants to turn Rey in for a bounty as well. And that's when things, Rey doesn't want to be getting turned in by no bounty. So Rey beats the shit out of everybody, just straight up, no problem whatsoever. Beats the shit out of everybody that ambushes them. And the whole thing ends with Rey pointing a lightsaber down to Poe's acquaintance. And she's like, I don't want to kill you. But then they immediately become friends. That's about as much investment as you get to have in this conflict that they were supposed to have. They're immediately best friends. In the very next scene that you see Poe and this acquaintance of his that was super mad and that had hated him and that all of these things, she's actually extremely supportive. She tells him, "Oh no, you have to survive, and the rebellions are only hope," and yada yada yada. And I'm just like, you're a mercenary not even like 2 minutes ago. What happened? But, it is what it is. Not only that, but she ends up giving him like a special item that allows him to land his ship anywhere, including Ren's Star Destroyer, because why not? So yeah, she just gives him this thing, which was like her get out of jail free card that she had been working for with her crew this whole time. But hey, they're best friends now, so who cares? In the meantime, they do reprogram C-3PO's memory, which is done by one character that a lot of people really like. Is a really small dude called Bobo Freak or whatever. And Bobo Freak is apparently one of the more likable characters in this movie. I'm like, whatever. He reprograms C-3PO, but they make a big drama out of reprogramming C-3PO because he is going to lose all of his memories, right? So again, it's one of those moments where like, oh wow, C-3PO is not going to remember anything that happened. Wow, this is an emotional moment. And C-3PO kind of like looks around and everybody's like, oh, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm taking a last look at my friends. And it's like, oh wow, we're all so emotional. And it's also 5 minutes later, nothing but a thing. R2-D2 has backups, dude. Who cares? He didn't lose his memory at all. So they play this thing off like it's a big sacrifice. Doesn't even fucking matter. Literally 5 minutes later, boom, C-3PO's back to his old self. He has all of his memories. Everything's good. Everything's right with the world. And they still get the data that they needed out of C-3PO, which basically says, hey, the thing you're looking for is on Endor. Boom, easy mode. Then here's this was so weird. So actually, no, wait, before we get to that, I'm just all over the place. And the reason I'm all over the place is because the movie is also all over the place. So after this, what do? They take their ship that they had taken from the desert and they go to Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer because they figure out that Chewie is actually alive. So they go to rescue Chewie at Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer, and when they get there, they end up getting separated because Rey wants to go get the knife, which is on Kylo Ren's room. So she goes to get the knife, and the other two, which was Finn and I don't know if the droids were with them at that time or not, but it was Finn and Poe, and they just like are kicking ass. They go inside that Star Destroyer and they are taking down stormtroopers left and right, like just like kicking everybody's ass nonstop. Again, I thought it was kind of cool and refreshing to see Finn as anything else besides a goddamn comic relief. Even if it was incredibly unrealistic of them to just like, hey, we're just going to dock on this Star Destroyer because we have this special item that my friend gave me. And as soon as we dock here, we're going to just like shoot our way out. There's no infiltration. There's no plan for nothing. We get in here, we shoot our way in. And that's what they did. They killed everybody. Oh no, there was a scene where Rey Jedi mind tricked a couple of stormtroopers, which I don't think it was the first time. She did that in The Force Awakens too, but this time her Jedi mind trick was on another level. She was like, "You guys are happy that we're here," and the stormtrooper was like, "Oh man, we're so glad you guys are here." And I was like, "Really? You have to make fun of them that bad?" But okay, I mean, whatever. I mean, stormtroopers have always been somewhat of comedic relief. But then the most surprising thing possible happened, which was a stormtrooper actually landed a shot on one of the protagonists. He shot Poe in the arm. I was like, what the hell? A stormtrooper landed a shot? That's friggin' amazing. So yeah, they did end up getting captured. But before we talk about their capture, let's talk about what happened with Rey. So Rey was not with them at that time. She was in Kylo's bedroom over in his destroyer, and she had found the knife. She picked up Chewie's bolt caster, Chewie's ammo belt thing. She picked up all of Chewie's stuff. Now, oh yeah, and they also released Chewie while they were getting away, but then they were captured. Did they release Chewie? I don't remember if they were captured before or after they released Chewie, but it doesn't really matter all that much because they get Chewie basically. So while she's on Kylo's room, this is actually a scene that I really enjoyed, which is Kylo reaches out to her again. And here's the interesting thing. So Kylo's down on the planet where they were just at, which is like Kijimi or whatever. Kylo can sense that Rey is nearby, but he doesn't know where she is. So he reaches out to her, and the both of them are having a conversation, and they start a telekinetic lightsaber fight. I actually thought that was pretty cool. Again, it's that special force power they have where they can kind of like teleport items between themselves, and they were fighting each other from different locations. So sometimes you would see Rey down on the planet fighting Kylo. Other times you would see Kylo down up on the Star Destroyer fighting Rey. And again, I like that scene. I know that a lot of people are going to have a problem with that scene. I like the force link that they have going, the whole dyad in the force thing. I liked it. I thought it was kind of cool, and it gave some, interesting things to their force connection. I thought that was special. And it was cool that, they would destroy like a bag which had stuff on the ground, and you would see that being transported into the spaceship. And eventually Kylo realizes where she is, and then he like just goes up to his Star Destroyer. They try to lock down the ship and whatever. So at this point, let's go back to our heroes that had been captured with Chewie. They were ordered to be basically executed, and as they were about to be executed, Hux shows up. Poor Hux. Hux shows up and he saves them. Basically, Hux says, "I want to do this myself," and then he takes the bolter away from the stormtrooper gives him the bolter. He grabs the bolter, shoots the other stormtroopers. Right, he kills all the stormtroopers, and then he's like, "I am the rebel spy." So Hux is a rebel spy. This is it just really sucks for the character of Hux. I mean, I'm not emotionally invested in his character, but to see like where he was in The Force Awakens, which is he's like this mad leader. He's like the Hitler of modern times or something. Will restore order to the galaxy. He's like that guy, right? Like Grand Moff, whatever, guy from the Death Star. He's like that guy. He's got the full power of the First Order. He's got Supreme Leader Snoke. He's like the guy who is executing all of that stuff, and he's like a main general. Then you get to The Last Jedi, he becomes a fucking comic relief throughout the entirety of the movie. His character loses any sense of gravitas that it could ever had, just becomes a running joke. And then you get to this movie, and his character is just like a weakling who is leaking informations to the rebels, and it doesn't even make sense. It just doesn't fucking make sense. The reason it doesn't make sense is like, look, this is a guy who is mega prideful, super invested in the victory of the Empire, and somehow he's leaking information to the rebels because he wants Kylo Ren to lose. He's going to cause the Empire to fall apart because he just wants Kylo Ren. He made it that petty and that personal against Kylo Ren that it doesn't make sense as far as I'm concerned. Does not make one bit of sense, one iota of sense. But whatever. They did that to his character, and then what ends up happening is that immediately after he does this and he saves them and they all go away in the Millennium Falcon and all that, he gets shot because he says that, oh, they subdued me and they forced me and whatever, he comes up with a story because he wants to keep spying for the rebels, I guess. I don't know. And he's immediately made and they kill him. And I basically looked at it as a mercy killing. That was JJ just like, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna off you, Hux. He was probably talking to the actors like, look, dude, I know what Rian Johnson did to your character. We're just gonna mercy kill him on this movie so that you don't have to deal with any of that bullshit anymore. So he just mercy kills him, just like straight up. He gets dead. Done deal. They then run away. There's like a scene where they escape and they use like the jet vents of the Millennium Falcon to push stormtroopers away and whatnot. But I didn't really care too much about that. It was like, whatever. They got away, basically. So after they got away, they go to Endor, where apparently there's remains of the second Death Star, which... yeah, I don't know how such large chunks of the Death Star ended up on Endor, considering how it blew up. I mean, I guess some chunks would end up there, but I didn't think they would be that big. But there is room for interpretation. I actually went back and I watched that scene again, and you do see like significant chunks of the Star Destroyer coming off. Even in the original films, you see this when the big explosion is happening. I thought it had just been vaporized. I know for sure the first Death Star is like completely vaporized in the films, like nothing is left. But that second Death Star, you do see a couple of chunks in the original films. So you could, suspend your disbelief enough to believe, okay, so, the Endor was close enough to where the second Death Star was. That's where they had like their whole shield generator and all of that stuff. So yeah, it makes sense that some bits would end up flying into Endor. So they go to Endor, at least I think it's Endor. I'm like 90% sure that the planet they go to is Endor. It looks very different. And they find like a bunch of First Order stormtroopers who rebelled, kind of like Finn. It almost seems like they give Finn a new love interest, which I was kind of confused. I was like, is it a love interest? Is it not? Because again, half of the movie was left in the cutting board. And again, I do want to watch the full movie. I hope they eventually release like a complete version of this movie so that I can understand the story a little bit better and the intention behind some of the characters a little bit better. But they go to Endor, and there was this moment where I was like, oh, finally, the characters are going to take like 5 minutes to break. Because up until this point, like I'm talking to you guys in terms of like the whole movie, up until this point, it's just been action sequence and action sequence. And you guys might think I'm skipping over important story detail. I'm not. It's just action sequence, action sequence, action sequence, action sequence, nonstop. It's XXX with a Star Wars skin, straight up. So we get to Endor, and I actually thought, oh, there's finally going to be a break because they can't get to the Death Star because there's like a massive tsunami around the Death Star. There's waves bigger than skyscrapers. There's like massive friggin' waves, preventing Rey from getting to the Death Star, right? So the refugees that were deserters, the stormtrooper deserters that were there, they say, oh, we'll take you to the Death Star, but we have to wait until the sea calms down a little bit. We'll go in the morning or whatever it was. So we have to wait for that. And I was like, finally, there's going to be some character development. No, fuck that. Rey's like, you know what? Boom, I'm going to steal a boat. I'm going to get myself on a boat and I'm going to go to the Death Star. And I was like, really? Fucking really? She's like the best lightsaber duelist in the world. She's the best starfighter pilot in the world. She's the best at fixing things in the world. She's just the best. She's the best. And now she apparently is also an extremely skilled sailor. She's an extremely skilled sailor. She grabs that friggin', they call that a skimmer. She grabs a skimmer. She goes into the water and she's just like riding those waves. No problem whatsoever. She's like, oh, I can operate this thing. Ain't nothing but a thing. Here we go. Boom, 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 boom. Jumps over the waves, gets to the Death Star. She gets to the Death Star, goes straight into the throne room of the Death Star because naturally it's going to be intact. Because why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't the throne room and the Death Star be intact at this point? I mean, of course it's intact. So she goes in there, the room's intact, a door opens, she goes inside, and her dark self is in there. And that's the thing that you see in the trailer where she comes up with comes up with the lightsaber that kind of folds downwards, and she looks like she's a Sith. That's just her dark self. It's kind of like a callback to what happens in Dagobah with Luke. If you guys remember that in Empire Strikes Back, where he goes into that cave and he fights Darth Vader, but it's actually himself. It's kind of like a callback to that scene. I didn't really think it made a whole lot of sense, but basically in there's also the Sith Wayfinder she's been looking for this whole time that will guide her to Exegol, the planet where Palpatine is, right? So she finds that thing. By the way, at this point, Rey still doesn't know that she's a Palpatine. This is kind of important. But she finds the MacGuffin, the Sith Wayfinder. She fights herself. She loses, but she still gets the MacGuffin. She loses, she gets thrown off of the room, but she still gets the Sith Wayfinder. But Kylo's there. As the second she comes out of the room, Kylo is just there with her. He's like, hey, what's up? So Kylo picks up the artifact that she's been looking for this whole time, crushes it. And he's like, the only way you're going to get to Exegol is with me. And so she gets mad and she starts fighting him. So they both fight. And this is probably one of the cooler scenes in the movie where they're actually fighting good lightsaber fight. And interestingly enough, I'm going to tell you guys something very interesting about Kylo's lightsaber. For those of you that did not watch the movie, Kylo's lightsaber guard works. Because there's a scene where they're fighting, and I noticed it because I was paying attention to that. I was like, oh, is he going to use the guard finally? And there's a scene where, I don't know, she slides her blade or something, and it hits the guard, and it stops. So the guard works. I don't know if it's made out of some kind of special metal that lightsabers can't go through, but that lightsaber guard that he's got on his lightsaber actually works. I was a little bit disappointed with the lightsaber style. The fight itself is cool, but the lightsaber style in which Kylo fights was disappointing because for those of you that paid enough attention in Last Jedi, and this is going to be something that might be very specific to me, but for those of you that paid attention in The Last Jedi, Kylo Ren, when he was fighting with his lightsaber, it's almost like he's wielding a two-handed sword. Right? All of his moves are really big and heavy. Whereas when Rey was wielding Luke's lightsaber, she was much more one-handed, super agile, all that stuff. Kylo would fight brutally two-hander mode. In this, Kylo holds his lightsaber reversed and it's just okay, so both of them go back to one-handed styles. I just really like the concept of Kylo's lightsaber being more like a greatsword type weapon versus a one-handed type weapon. I don't know. There was something very appealing to me about that. But anyway, they fight, and Kylo wins, which was surprising for me. I did not expect Kylo to win. I expected Rey to be all-powerful, almighty, all this, all that. Kylo wins. At some point during the fight, he reveals that she's a Palpatine. At least I think it was during that fight that it was revealed, but whatever. So he reveals that she is a Palpatine, and after he essentially wins, he's about to perform the coup de grace, he's about to kill her, Leia somehow senses that something's going wrong and that Rey's going to die. So Leia cheats. Leia reaches out to Ben and dies. That's all of her strength that she had left. She reaches out to Ben and then dies. That's how Leia dies. She dies reaching out to Ben. I call him Ben, Kylo, whatever. Ben Solo. I say Ben because she says Ben. But she reaches out to Kylo. Kylo stops, drops his saber because he's surprised. Oh, Leia reached out to me. What's going on? He hesitates, drops his lightsaber. And as he drops his lightsaber, Rey does the cheapest fucking thing you could ever do. The most non-Jedi thing possible, imaginable, which is, oh, he dropped his lightsaber. She grabs his lightsaber midair, murders him. Cold blood. After she's been defeated by Kylo, she knows that Leia gives her an opening. She picks up his lightsaber, murders him. Straight up. Kylo's like, what the fuck? So she wins the fight the most dishonorable way possible, imaginable. It's basically, it's those people that beat Sekiro by cheating at the game, and they're like, ha 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 ha, that's Rey. That's what she did. She beat Kylo Ren, and then she cheated. She got beat by Kylo Ren, and then she cheated at the game, and she cheap shot at him. But because that wouldn't be honorable, she force heals Kylo Ren. And then she tells him, oh, I wanted to take your hand, Ben Solo's hand, not Kylo Ren. And that this was actually cool for Kylo's arc in a way, because I do appreciate Kylo's arc because he is someone who's been on the dark side the whole time. And in the final movie, they actually do the thing where they turn him into the light. I like that. I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool that, because Kylo is a character that I appreciated throughout this trilogy quite a bit. I liked Kylo's character. Even in The Last Jedi, I still like Kylo, even though The Last Jedi is a shit movie. But if you like Last Jedi, that's fine. Okay, don't get upset. But yeah, Kylo turns to the light side. He throws his lightsaber, and I was like, no, I really like that lightsaber. That lightsaber was really cool. But he throws the lightsaber away because, if you do a little bit of research into lightsabers, you know that the reason the thing is red is because they corrupt the kyber crystals in their lightsabers. So, that whole thing. So that the whole symbolism there. He throws his lightsaber away. He goes to the light side. Han shows up. Han is not a Force ghost. I think some people might be confusing that because I've seen a lot of people talk about how did Han become a Force? He's not a Force ghost. It's just a memory. They even say as much in the film. It's like, you're just a memory. So Han shows up to kind of like, it's him kind of making his way back to the light. And yeah, so after that, because Rey figured out she was a Palpatine, she goes to Ahch-To, which is where Luke was in isolation. She goes there. She steals, what's his face? Kylo Ren's TIE fighter, and she flies to Ahch-To. She lands the TIE fighter, burns it because she doesn't want to be able to get away. Kind of like same symbolism that Luke crashed his X-Wing under the water so that he wouldn't be able to get away. And her plan is to basically close herself off to the Force, just like Luke did, to kind of prevent her from, being influenced by a Palpatine, because she is a Palpatine and she still remembers the whole scene where she lightninged Chewie's transport, or the transport that was not Chewie's, but whatever. So she isolates herself in Ahch-To, and then she picks up Luke's lightsaber and she throws it at this big fire where the TIE fighter is burning. And this was actually a really cool scene because even though this was basically JJ giving a slap to Rian Johnson, but basically Luke shows up in a Force Ghost and he grabs the saber. I know Force Ghosts influencing the real world like that, still not perfectly okay with it, but for this scene, I think it was important for a lot of Star Wars fans to see, because what happened afterwards is Luke goes and he says, a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect. As in kind of like, remember how in episode 8 I threw that shit over my... A Jedi's weapon deserves more respect. So basically they retcon pretty much everything that Luke did in the previous movie. He tries his best to like do a redemption arc for Luke Skywalker, which shouldn't have even been necessary if it hadn't been completely and utterly destroyed in The Last Jedi, but whatever. And so they explained that he had actually gone there because he was, he was looking for the Wayfinder thingy, whatever. But basically there was more to Luke being in Ahch-To than him just like closing himself off to the Force and all of that. They kind of retconned it into like Luke was rallying. He was like regrouping his thoughts and whatever. And he was trying to figure out a way to get to Exegol and all of that other stuff. So then Rey is like, well, yeah, but I burned my ship. I can't do anything. And Luke tells, yeah, we know you're a Palpatine, but we still wanted to train you because Leia was the one training Rey at that point. There's like a flashback where they show that Leia actually had Force training, where Luke was training Leia, but then Leia says that if she kept on that path of being trained as a Jedi, that, it would put her on the path that it will eventually kill her son. I mean, she still ended up doing that, but, Rey saved her son anyway. But she did not want it to take that path where eventually she was going to kill her son, so that's why she does not become a Jedi. But you do see Leia beating Luke in a duel, but it was a practice duel, so it was whatever. But then Luke he shows Rey where Leia's lightsaber is, and so she gets Leia's lightsaber. So she now has Leia's lightsaber and Luke's lightsaber with her. And Luke then lifts up the X-Wing from the water. Yes, we're still talking about Force Ghost Luke raises up his X-Wing that he had under the water, and then Rey gets in the cockpit of Luke's X-Wing and flies off to Exegol, because she now has the MacGuffin, because it was in Kylo Ren's ship, the Sith Wayfinder. It was on Kylo Ren's ship, so she has that. She hooks that up on Luke's X-Wing, and she does the whole path that you have to go through the nebula while broadcasting what she's doing to the Rebel Alliance so that people know how to get to Exegol, the Empire planet. And I know that this video is already pretty long. Bear with me. We're coming up on the end here, because this is kind of like, this is the final conflict, right? Everybody heads out to Exegol. The plan for the Rebel Alliance is that they're going to basically broadcast a message, because they're all full of hope again. And they're like, oh, we can do this. We'll broadcast a message and everybody will come. Everybody will come to help us out. The Millennium Falcon is going to go get reinforcements, and they pick up their whatever's left out of their ships. There's a couple of Y-Wings, a couple of A-Wings, a couple of X-Wings, and Poe kind of leads everybody into combat. Poe, once again, is someone that I just felt throughout the entirety of the movie just kind of like got dumped on a little bit. They do expand on his background story a little bit. Apparently he was a spice trader. That's why he's such a good pilot or whatever, but so Poe leads the Rebel Alliance forces through the same Force Nebula thing that kind of blocks off Exegol. And Rey goes in ahead of them, and then Kylo joins them in there as well. Kylo that is now from the light side without a lightsaber. So what happens here is the fleet in Exegol, the big Empire fleet of like 10,000 Star Destroyers, or however many ridiculous number of Star Destroyers, due to the planet's magnetic interferences, they can't raise their shields. So the fleet is somewhat vulnerable while it is on the planet. It also, due to those magnetic interferences, they have to rely on this one tower to kind of like navigate before they exit the planet. They have to rely on one radar tower that transmits them all the information they need to kind of like navigate. So the Rebels' plan is to deploy a ground force to destroy this tower, to prevent, to screw up the navigation systems for the Star Destroyers, so they can't really function properly, and they also don't have shields, so they're very vulnerable to being attacked by, smaller Rebel fighters. So that's their plan. But what ends up happening is the moment they get to the planet, the Empire sees through their plan. They're like, oh, okay, they're going to destroy the tower so that we can't use navigations. Okay, so tell every ship to just, do their navigation based around on our ship. And they just centered all communications into this one ship, which is from Admiral Pride or whatever, which is like a major figure in this movie. So they focus all the communications around that ship. And so the Rebels realize this as well. I don't know how they're realizing all this stuff in full time. Everything's happening so fast because, again, action sequence on action sequence on action sequence. I don't know how they're realizing this, how the Empire's like, aha, I know what they're doing. They're attacking the tower. Stop. Transmit everything here. And then the Rebels themselves also realize, wait, they're not using the tower anymore. Every communication's on that ship. Oh, wait. Oh, on the Rebel side, I actually know why it is. It's because Finn has a feeling. But it turns out that I think that's because Finn is force sensitive, so he can kind of sense stuff, which actually helps them in combat. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with Finn being force sensitive because they do kind of allude to it in The Force Awakens, so whatever. But essentially what ends up happening is they then go and they storm that Star Destroyer with a ground force, because the plan to destroy that tower was to deploy a ground force while the fighters kept everybody else busy. So they storm a Star Destroyer with a ground force from the outside. They literally land a transporter on top of a Star Destroyer, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Because they stormed that Star Destroyer on horseback. Horses running, I mean, not real horses, like some other animal, but you can basically equate them to horses. People were riding them, and they stormed the Star Destroyer from the outside, riding on horses on top of a... All right. All right, man. Sure. Horses on top of a Star Destroyer. Why the hell not? So there's a big space battle, and at the same time, Rey and Kylo kind of start converging on the Emperor. And there's some people that go to attack Rey and some people that go to attack Kylo. Now, the guys that go to attack Kylo are actually the Knights of Ren, which Knights of Ren I didn't find them particularly appealing. They're just a bunch of dudes with melee weapons, and I think one of them had like a gun or something. But basically, they start beating up on Kylo real bad because he doesn't really have a lightsaber. And at this point, Kylo reaches out to Rey, and Rey's got two lightsabers. Rey's in front of Palpatine. Palpatine's like, oh, strike me down and be consumed by your anger. Enjoy the dark side. And the usual Emperor shtick, right? So basically the whole point is that Emperor wants her to kill him, and then his spirit force will go to her, and all of the Siths that lived within him, all of their spirit force goes into her, and she would become like the ultimate Sith. That's like the Emperor's plan. But, Rey is a little bit divided because she sees that her fleet is just getting, like, destroyed. And you see a lot of scenes where Poe is just like, oh, my God, I don't know what's going to happen. We're all going to die. It's the end, and yada, 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 right? So at this point, Rey senses that Kylo's taking a beating. Kylo reaches out to her, and Kylo's just like, it's almost like Kylo, hey, can I have one of those two lightsabers you got there? And so Rey puts her lightsaber in her back almost like this. And next thing you know, Kylo pulls out a lightsaber out of his back. So they're able to transmit objects to one another. And after that, Rey grabs Leia's lightsaber, which she also had. So Rey uses Leia's lightsaber to beat up on the people that were trying to beat up on her. Kylo uses Luke's lightsaber to beat up on the Knights of Ren, kills all the Knights of Ren. And then they both get together close to the Emperor. What happens? Emperor's like, oh, this is great. Starts sucking the life force out of both of them. He's like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. Because, like, Emperor is, like, in a really weakened state. He's got, like, this life support system going. So he just starts sucking the life force out of those two. And he starts regenerating into becoming the actual Emperor. After that, after he just, like, kind of regenerates and stuff, he chucks a massive ball of lightning into the air and just starts destroying the rebel fleet, which is kind of weird. Which, by the way, at this point, a bunch of reinforcements showed up out of nowhere, like, I don't know, thousands and thousands of ships just kind of like showed up completely out of nowhere because it was the message that they had sent, which supposedly nobody was really coming, but it turns out that everybody was actually coming, and there's just like a bunch of people that showed up to help out. So this is massive space battle, but the Palpatine, he just like chucks a bunch of lightning up into the air, starts fucking everything up. And at this point, Kylo Ren stands up. He starts standing up from getting like force drained or whatever. He's like getting back up, getting ready to, fight back against the Emperor. And the Emperor just goes like, die. And chucks Kylo Ren off of a cliff, which I was really disappointed because like I really wanted the conflict with the Emperor at the end to be something that lasted a little bit longer. But no, it's just like he chucks Kylo Ren away. Kylo Ren doesn't even get to fight the Emperor. You're done. And at that point, a little bit later down the line, Rey starts getting up as well. So when Rey starts getting up is when Force Lightning has to stop because he has to focus his attention on Rey. And then, they continue to fight the fleet, do the whole thing, right? And as he is fighting Rey, this was the most unsatisfying conclusion that they could have done to the film. So he starts shooting Force Lightning at Rey. Rey blocks it with Leia's lightsaber. Now, if you guys remember, Kylo Ren also had Luke's lightsaber, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. And, he's the Emperor is going like, oh, I'm going to destroy you and all of this other stuff, right? And she's just like blocking the lightning with one lightsaber. And then suddenly she force pulls the other lightsaber to her, forms a cross with the lightsabers to absorb the lightning, and somehow starts reflecting the lightning back at him. And this doesn't make any sense to me because the Emperor notices that like, oh shit, my lightning is hurting me. I should probably stop. No, that's not what he does at all. The Emperor just goes like, hey, you know what? My lightning is hurting me. She's reflecting it. Surely she can't reflect it if I give it more power. He goes even harder and starts reflecting even harder, fucking him up even more. But he's like, nah, this is not possible. I'm going to keep doing it. Like at no point did he even think, maybe I should stop this. I'm killing myself. Just maybe I should stop. No, he goes like, I'm going to put more power, limitless power. And he fucking kills himself. He kills himself because Rey just reflects all of the lightning back to him, and then he dies. After she does all this, she dies too. Oh, by the way, she was helped by all of the Jedi, because when she was down for the count, she was looking, all the ships getting fucking blown up. All of the Jedi channeled their energy into her. So it's not, I think it's a way that JJ thought, let's just not make Rey the most overpowered thing ever. Let's just make the claim that the Jedi, all of the Jedi that ever existed, like you'll hear Mace Windu, you'll hear Anakin Skywalker, you'll hear voices from pretty much all of the Jedi you can imagine. And you'll hear them kind of powering up Rey. So it's almost like a Dragon Ball moment of give me your energy. And all of these Jedi Force ghosts are giving Rey their energy to get her back on her feet to fight against Palpatine. So, then she does the whole Force Reflect thing, kills Palpatine. And after that, immediately she falls over and dies. She looks dead. Her eyes aren't moving. She's got her eyes wide open. She's like, and she's also very pale. Immediately after that, Kylo Ren starts coming back up from getting pushed into a cliff. He goes to Rey, and he basically starts giving Rey his life force, because somehow Kylo Ren also has Force Heal. But I don't know if it's because Kylo Ren doesn't have enough strength, or if because, she's just too far gone and he has to use too much of his life force. But basically, Kylo Ren heals her. After he heals her, she gets up, kisses him, and then he dies. I was like, this is some Romeo and Juliet shit going on right here. So Kylo Ren, after he heals her, immediately dies. And I think he becomes a Force ghost because his body just kind of disappears. So Kylo Ren becomes a Force ghost. I mean, I keep saying Kylo. Now he's just Ben Solo because he's not really a Sith anymore at this point. But yeah, they do that, and then the new fleet that showed up, everybody starts focusing on the cannons below the Star Destroyers, because that starts a chain reaction, destroys the Star Destroyers. They don't have shields, so they destroy everything. Who was it? Finn. Finn does a sacrificial play, and he wasn't prevented by Rose from doing a sacrificial play. He was able to take out the main Star Destroyer. And then he was rescued by Lando Calrissian flying the Millennium Falcon. And I think one of the actors, I'm not 100% sure, but I think one of the actors manning the turrets on the Millennium Falcon was actually Wedge. If you guys remember Wedge from A New Hope, he's flying. Was he gold? He wasn't Gold Leader, was he? He was one of the Gold Squadrons. I don't remember, but you guys know who Wedge is for sure. If you watched it, Wedge, Biggs, all that stuff. You know who Wedge is. And I think Wedge was the one manning the turrets on the Millennium Falcon, but I'm not sure, because again, it just cuts off so fast. Everything in this movie is lightning pace. You just you friggin' blink and you missed it. And that's kind of the end. They win the fight. And then, like I said at the start, Rey goes back to Tatooine. It shows that she's got her own lightsaber, and she buries off the lightsabers of Leia and Luke next to the homestead. And yeah, like I said, at the end of all of this, even though this wasn't a terrible movie, if this was the direction they were going to take the story in, I would rather just do a new story. Why'd you have to continue the Skywalker saga? That saga was done at the end of episode 6. It was done. It was over. You should have done a different story, which, again, like I said, well, if you take a look at all of the movies that Disney has produced, right? They did Solo. Fucking terrible movie. Sorry. It's a bad movie. It's not as bad as Last Jedi, but I didn't like it. And Han Solo is one of my favorite characters too, so whatever. So Solo, not a great movie. Force Awakens was actually kind of okay. I thought that was kind of okay. It felt a little bit too familiar to A New Hope. Last Jedi, I hate The Last Jedi. It kind of almost single-handedly ruined Star Wars for me. And then there's this one, and I don't think that, any of them was really worth making all that much, to be quite honest. Whereas if they had done more stuff like Rogue One, it would have been way cooler. Just tell other stories of other things. That there's so much to pull from in the Star Wars universe that I just don't understand. I just don't understand why they had to go to the Skywalker saga and then do this. It was, to me, these 3 movies, they're never going to be a part of canon. That's just the way it is. That's just the way that I feel. But anyways, I've been rambling on for long enough. I'm pretty sure that most people won't even make it this far into the video, so it is whatever. If you did enjoy the video, hit it up with a like. If you didn't enjoy it, hit it up with a dislike. Feedback is important. Let me know what you think about Rise of Skywalker if you did watch it. But to me, it was just very disappointing. It is what it is. It was not the worst thing ever. He did try to retcon a couple of things, which I think was important to at least, be like, okay, I realized that a lot of disrespect happened in The Last Jedi. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, and may your shields never break.